everyone. Good afternoon. Hope you guys are all enjoying AWE so far, checking out the show floor, going to the sessions. So my name is Cassie Lee. I am a product manager for DAQRI's hardware platform. So for those of you who aren't familiar with DAQRI, we have smart glasses, and in the past we have been known for our DAQRI smart helmet as well. So I've been working mainly on the hardware side and kind of making sure the integration happens up towards the software level and thinking about the applications that we need to solve for. So today I'm going to give more of a higher level presentation on how we think AR can help bring improvements across different industries, and then how we can think about evaluating how those will be successful in the long run. So I'm starting out with a little bit of context. So first, everyone knows that AR investments have grown a ton over the last 6 years, massive growth and continuing to grow. And I start out with this because it leads to kind of a very complex and large ecosystem of AR players. So you have AR players across many different subsections of the stack, as well as focusing on very different types of markets. So how do you begin to kind of navigate that? And how do you start to think about it from both like an investor and customer standpoint to evaluate different customer solutions and think about how do these AR solutions solve my need, as well as from an AR company side and thinking about how do I actually build a more holistic solution that solves a problem that needs to be solved. So what I'm going to cover today is I'm going to give one perspective on how we can break out the market, and then go through some of the criteria that is needed to be successful within each of those segments, as well as explain some company examples within each of those segments. So first we have consumer, and second we have this kind of in-between market segment, enterprise to consumer, which I'll explain a little bit. And then third, we have enterprise. So I'll go through all of these, but that's kind of a snapshot of what I'm going to talk about. So the consumer segment, what the characteristics are of that is essentially you have a consumer who is your buyer. So what that means is they probably don't have a lot of money to spend. So you kind of have to think about like, right now, a headset is going to be tougher to get into the market for them, so everything is very app-based. In the future, that could change, but definitely, probably, in my opinion, 3+ years or so. The end user is also usually the same consumer, and so you have to think about, like, they're trying to figure out, is this worth the money, and is it something I'm going to use in my daily life? Is it already going to fit into like all of my other existing technology and what I'm doing, and is it even something I want? From a use case perspective, I say that it's a pretty broad range of use cases just because this end user could be trying to shop for clothes or home furniture. They could be trying to drive their car and figure out where they need to go, navigate within a store. They could be walking around outside. And so there's a lot of different things they could be doing, and that's all supposed to be solved in kind of one solution. From a location standpoint, a majority of where these users are going to be are in their home, walking around urban areas, in stores, maybe kind of navigating in their car as well. So I kind of go through a couple criteria that I think is needed to be able to scale and have success. So the low price point, again, because your buyer is an end consumer. It has to be very socially acceptable. So this, I'm kind of thinking more of a headset. If you have to design a headset, it has to be something that doesn't feel weird to wear, and they have to be comfortable that they're not going to be out of place. They fit in with everyone else. So obviously, the ideal is just a normal pair of glasses. But we have a ways to go to get to that in a hardware form. In a very engaging content ecosystem. So kind of what we have right now with app stores for smartphones. We need to have a large variety and useful and fun apps or some kind of services that are usable on this platform. Kind of like invisible comfort. So right now, as you guys have all been trying on these different devices, they definitely are getting lighter and better, but it's something that has to be able to last all day long and has to be able to be kind of with the end user and be able to allow them to be mobile and be portable. A very intuitive, reliable user experience. So, it can't be something that's faulty. I think, like when you look back at the beginning of the iPhone and using kind of gestures, it took a while to get used to that, but it has to be something that actually responds to what you're doing. It has to be very intuitive, almost foolproof, because anyone and everyone may be using it from a consumer standpoint. And then completely and very realistically immersive. So, when you think about headsets now, I think even the field of view is pretty limited in what we have, and so you're still kind of looking through this little pinhole, and so you still are a bit limited from that, and so I think eventually like that has to grow further and further. But for now, a lot of the uses are in applications. So I go through a couple examples. I mean, all of these you guys are probably familiar with, but gaming, of course, Pokemon Go is one of the things that made AR more of a known phenomenon across the general population. And so, with that, you can kind of go around, walk around outside with your friends, and you can basically play these games overlaid on top of the real world that you're exploring. You can also play games in your living room, and these things can be built on top of your tables or your sofa or the floor, and you can have these interactions kind of with like a game overlaid on an existing map of like a room. At the last Google I/O, they announced kind of a navigation that was built on top of what you are seeing through your camera. So essentially trying to build in navigation to not just being on your phone, but to something that's overlaid with the environment that you're seeing. And shopping from home. So like IKEA, I think Lowe's is the middle one, and then one of these countertop manufacturers. They're basically all trying to make it easier for you to make a purchase from your home. So you can basically measure and see if something fits in a certain area. You can move it around, see if it fits with your other furniture, if it matches. Like you have a little more ability to check something out before you actually buy. And before I go on, I mean, all of these examples I've given are basically through the lens of a smartphone, right? So you have to carry the smartphone with you. You have to put it up. It's a very small frame, and it's great for right now because that's what we have. But I think eventually, ideally we get to a place where we have glasses, and you can actually, you don't have to wear these things, and all of the same content can exist, but it can move and port over to your glasses. But again, like you have all the same challenges that I had shown in the past. So if we go back. You have all these same challenges where, okay, I guess it only goes forward. Do you mind rewinding me back a slide? Yeah. So you have all the challenges from the prior slide about, you have to have it very comfortable to wear, low price point. It essentially has to become invisible to a user. And I think we have at least a minimum of 3 years, maybe 5 or so to get there on a broad scale. So the next segment is a little bit of an in-between segment, and I call it enterprise to consumer, just because your buyer is actually an enterprise. So you have a little bit more money to spend, and I'll explain some of the examples, but one is like a dealership or a retail model. So essentially then the end user is still a consumer. They could come into your store, come into your showroom, and you could still let them try on AR. But in this case, it's nice because they have a very specific use case. It's not anything and everything in their life, but essentially, you're there to view a specific product. You're there to make sure something fits in this environment that you're considering buying or visiting. And so many of the usage locations are within like a showroom or in some urban environment. So here, the criteria for success is a little more relaxed in the sense that you have a little more money to spend. So you just need to be able to prove the ROI. So obviously, there's still some willingness to spend money, but even then, it may not be for a $5,000, $3,000 device. It may be less. But if you can prove that you get more sales or you get more kind of reason for people to come to your store and actually make purchases, it may be proven to buy a couple for different showrooms. It also has to have the social acceptance, but it's a little easier because you're not using it all day long. You're using it for a very specific limitation of time. One of the differences here is like, as someone who buys it and then has to kind of create the content for a user to use, you have to have a very easy content transfer process, right? So if you're a dealer, you're trying to show cars, you have to have a very easy process for someone to get all of those models into whatever application or system you're providing, because they have to redo that over and over in order for this to be a valuable system and AR solution to them. Comfort and mobility, I think it is also just always going to be important for anyone, but I think because it's a limited use, you have a little bit more leeway. And then the user experience, it still needs to be intuitive and reliable. I think there's a little bit more backup to reference training. So you could have someone in there like a sales guy who can say, okay, you're not quite using it right, here, let me guide you. So there's a little more like structure that could be guided. And then I think the close representation to reality is just important because usually in these cases, it's about sales. It's about getting someone excited and interested in a specific, like how this product will look. You help someone visualize it in a better way. So it's important to be able to visualize that correctly. So examples here are retail, right? So Home Depot and Lowe's have kind of navigation apps where when you're in store, this is only in some stores, I think, because I haven't seen it personally everywhere, but they've talked about it. But you can walk through stores and it'll tell you like a path that's most efficient to pick up the products that you want to buy. You know, American Apparel in the past, they had scannable kind of in-store images that would bring up information about reviews, being able to share with someone, other videos that are helpful to your purchase. Different auto dealerships, so like Porsche, Ford, I think Land Rover, Mercedes-Benz, a couple, like Ferrari, a couple others as well. But they kind of have iPads and they equip their sales agents with them so they can walk around. And it's really nice because, I mean, there's limited physical inventory, but there's a ton of ways you can customize a car. So, you know, you can make those customizations on the fly, and as a potential customer, you can see that and make some decisions about add-ons and colors that, you know, you may not have been able to do or you had to visualize in the past. Education, so you know the school may be buying the equipment, they may be able to pay for more expensive hardware or software, but then you know the students are the ones who are able to benefit from it. You know, so you have all these different companies trying to, like universities and companies that are trying to create K through 12 education or even college education where you know some 3D object that you know maybe is being drawn in 2D or being shown on a 2D screen before now can be visualized in 3D. You can kind of explode it apart, interact with it. You have a little more ability to learn and engage with the content. Real estate, so the image with the lines is kind of like supposed to show like property area. So like as you're walking around property, like as a real estate agent, you can show like here's where your property line ends, here's where it starts. So it gives you a little bit more ability to integrate some of these components in. On the other two sides, these are kind of applications built for real estate agents and brokers. And so when they're selling different homes, they can say, here's your space, but okay, like how do you want to fill it out? What do you want to add in? And they can kind of showcase pre-made model homes. And so rather than just having physically purchased versions of furniture that you can't change later, you have that available for you, and you can try it out. I'm going to keep going. I know I'm kind of running behind. So enterprise, this is kind of the case where I put $3 signs. I know that's still not always true. In some enterprises, they still don't, you know, not want to pay for it all. But I think it goes back to the ROI and whether it's going to be worth the investment. But there's definitely more willingness to pay a higher price than you would for in a consumer case. Your end user is a worker, so you know the goals are mainly around like I want to get my job done. I don't want it to get in my way, and it's not always the same as a buyer, and there's very different goals. Use case is always, at least for now, it's narrow just because we are usually kind of brought on to help with a specific focused problem that they have. And the locations, you know, it can be outdoor, it can be at a factory, it could be at a hazardous location. There's a wider range, and what this means, to go through really quickly, is one of the biggest difficulties with enterprise is you have to meet the regulatory compliance. And so, you know, with whatever location you're supporting, with whatever tools you have to work with, like all of that isn't going to change for you, even if you bring in an AR solution. You basically have to come in and find out how you can fit into that. Otherwise, it's not a fit. And like, even if you can make a pilot work, you can't really scale over time. And like the same thing with IT systems, you have to be able to meet the security requirements. You have to work with the different wireless networks. I mean, like as part of DAQRI, we've worked through a lot of this stuff just because it's like, when you want to deploy in an enterprise, you just have to make sure that you can integrate with them. So a lot of the other stuff is from the past slides as well, but there's an addition of worker safety, but the same stuff with comfort, ROI, content transfer, and making sure that the content you're creating is relevant to the job that you have at hand. So some quick examples, healthcare, we've worked with Touch Surgery in the past and helped them do procedures for surgical like training, and so surgical residents can go through this, and it's a lot more interactive than reading from a textbook. Construction, we've worked with Mortensen in the past, and they're able to visualize different kind of options as they're in like a very barren construction environment that has not been started yet. So you can view where will the plumbing go, where will the walls go, where will the mechanical constructs go, where will the electrical circuits go, and then you can kind of even manage it throughout afterwards as a facilities maintenance. Training, we worked with the city of LA, and they have very costly training, and it costs a lot to repair their different headsets, and so they've gone through and built an instruction guide to doing repair, and so it reduced their training time from about 1.5 hours to 5 minutes. So it makes things much more intuitive rather than referencing some kind of 2D book. I'll go through really quickly. Manufacturing, we work with Siemens, and we have kind of worked on instructions for maintenance, how do you assemble different turbines. We've worked with Royal BAM on maintenance procedures for a sprinkler system, the military, the US Navy, they've been scanning their ships. And so I'm just gonna go through really quickly, I know we're out of time. But for DAQRI, what we've tried to do, if you guys don't know much about us, is in all the stuff that I've shown in the past, you can actually go on our website. There's videos and more information than just the images I've shown. But we've kind of found there's 5 core job functions that we want to tackle within at least the enterprise. And so what those are show, scan, tag, model, and guide. And these are very much written in a way so that it is obvious of what the app does. Essentially, show is, I have an issue and I want to show it to someone who is an expert and who can help me solve it. Scan is something where you want to scan your surroundings and turn it into a map and essentially capture that surrounding and save it for the future. Tag is you want to save some important piece of information and put it with your equipment. Something like I found an inspection issue and I want to save it for someone else to come back and take a look at it. Model, it's essentially a visualization tool. So you can track, or you can essentially model a building. You can walk through it, zoom in, zoom out, expand, and collaborate with other people on it. Guide is a set of instructions that you can go through to complete a procedure. And if you want more information, you can go online, check this out. And there's also ability to sign up for early access programs that we're kind of rolling out, and then give us feedback, and we always love to hear more. And I think that's it. So.